It's late. We done had a couple drinks.
Nah.
Listen, for you, yes, I'm saying I don't think most people intentionally get into situationships. It just happens. It happens because you
I,
were caught off
I
guard
think that's
by
weak.
somebody.
I
No, it's
think it's
not.
weak. I think it's weak. I think that is being in a situationship accidentally is crazy. That's wild. You know what else? Have you
It's
seen?
not.
Let me
It
tell you.
happens.
Let me tell you why this doesn't benefit. Do you watch Love Is Blind?
Yes.
Oh my God, season 8 just happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
Freaking David. Okay, David could not get over the fact that Lauren had been smashed by a person that they mutually knew a week before she went on to do the show. David could not live that down. When we as women, and most men, to be honest, their ego, they can't handle that. Could you be with a girl that you know has been smashed by somebody that you know?
Hey guys, welcome to Little Blackbird 91. We're talking to you guys about accidentally falling into a situationship that then turns into a relationship. Yeah, I know it sounds crazy. You accidentally fell into a situationship and then accidentally fell into a relationship. But listen, it's crazy, but it can happen. When an immovable force meets an irresistible force, this is usually what happens. So we're going to talk about this on this particular episode. And what we're going to do is going to break down several different points about how you actually fall into these situations. There are a number of things that actually happen in you formulating a relationship. Number one, sometimes the emotional bonding over time will take you into a relationship. The oxytocin, the serotonin, the dopamine, those chemicals that begin to flow when you're having sex usually, or having even intimate relationships with people where it's not even sexual, but it's intimately fulfilling, you can fall into a relationship. There is convenience turning into comfort. There is sexual chemistry over time. There is a fear of starting over. There is a gradual escalation without clarity. There is external pressure, but there's also another thing that's also another big factor: attachment styles. And I talk about this all the time. That actually, because of people's attachment styles, it actually can lend them into falling into a situationship, and that then turns into a relationship. So if you want to know more about this, listen, stick with this video. We're going to keep it nice and short and sharp. We're going to break a few things down for you. So if you're new to the channel, do me a massive favor, like it, share, subscribe, click on that wonderful bell button for notifications of the uploads. Listen, on this particular video, I was watching Ace Metaphor and Dr. Sarah, and I was inspired by their conversation because first and foremost, we need to define what a situationship is. And really, a situationship is simply a romantic or a sexual relationship that's not considered formal. There is no rules, there's no boundaries. We just are in this, we don't know what it is right now. It's a gray area, as I like to say. And we're not sure what it actually is. We're kind of moving and free flowing, and we haven't defined it as such. That's your situationship. How can you fall into that accidentally? Well, the reality of the situation is, in sometimes when you're dealing with somebody, at first glance, when you see them, you're not necessarily sparked. Why? It's not necessarily, might not be your type. Maybe you weren't actually looking for that particular relationship. Maybe you were just trying to be single. Your brain was switched off because that's not what you were trying to get into. And then you start interacting with this person, and maybe they are more emotional than your last partner was, or maybe they are more caring, or maybe their sex is fire and it's bomb. I mean, you probably shouldn't be having sex. That's probably going to get you into a lot of trouble. Maybe their conversation was inspiring. Was something that was very different. And usually, this is actually how it happens. There is something different about that particular person that inspires you to go, And so actually, maybe that isn't necessarily more enough of an investment to want to say relationship. So what you kind of do is what we call, you kind of browse the shop a little bit, right? You kind of see what's going on. And maybe you tell yourself, I told myself this year, no boyfriend, no girlfriend. I told myself this year, no relationship. I'm just going to be by myself. But you want to have a bit of fun. You shouldn't be doing that, by the way. But again, you're having a bit of fun. And then you realize the fun suddenly becomes consistent. And this is actually what happens to a lot of people. The fun becomes consistent, and to a point where you actually start to like qualities of the other person. You didn't think you were going to like them. On paper, they weren't necessarily your type, maybe even, right? But now suddenly you've spent enough time with them and you've been consistent with them that they now tick certain boxes that you thought were never going to be ticked. So let's break this down a little bit more, because I want to be able to give you some reasons. Point number one is this: emotional bonding over time will do it. Okay. Many times when people fall into situationships that then turn into relationships, it's first and foremost emotional bonding. You got into the situationship because there was actually emotional bonding, and you get into a relationship because there's emotional bonding. Even without any labels, without you actually saying this is what we actually are, the fact that you guys feel there's no pressure, and this is what gets you to, I'm going to do a whole series on this. What really gets people is that a lot of us are carrying emotional wounds, and we have got attachment issues. And what happens is low pressure is actually how you get stuck into a high pressure situation. The low pressure where you felt like there is no expectations took all the pressure off you, and actually was quite calm. And then you start sharing secrets. You start telling each other stories. You start, sleeping over. You guys start doing cuddling. You guys start doing things that are almost like relational, that builds oxytocin, the thing that keeps you guys bonded. And actually, you're not seeing anything bad about it because, again, the expectation of the label isn't necessarily there. And actually, what ends up happening is you start building these emotional attachments because you're being vulnerable. In fact, you're doing something probably that you probably don't usually do. I'm going to be very honest. Most people who are secure attachment, if you don't know what that is, people that have grown up in households where they can be autonomous, free to express themselves, they don't get triggered very easy. They're very even keel, regulated. Sometimes you can claim them as a bit boring. But those stable people don't usually fall into situationships. Why? Because they know their boundaries and they know their value. There's a lot of us who don't know our boundaries and we don't know our value. And then we find that in the relationship rather than defining that outside of the relationship. And so the brain doesn't need a title. The brain doesn't need you to put a label on it. It just needs to repeat the same patterns of behavior to become familiar with it and expose itself to the oxytocin and the dopamine that you'll get in a rush from. Number two is convenience turning into comfort. You literally being with this person regularly, they're probably your next door neighbor, or they just live not far from you, or they're a person who, is easy to get to. And you guys have, again, no pressure. It starts off low stakes. No one's doing too much because it's a comfortable setting. I can come, I can go whenever I want. I can sleep over whenever I want to. We can go out to dinner and it's nothing big. I'm not forced into doing something. It just feels relaxed. And that's what's going to get you. It's like the frog in the warming up of the butter. Eventually the frog doesn't realize it's going to get cooked, right? And that's you. You got cooked. All right. And so that comfort feels like safety and can mimic intimacy. And in fact, not even just mimic, it becomes intimacy because you're sharing things. Number three, sexual chemistry will confuse things always when it comes to emotional compatibility. Because good sex, especially, will have your brain somewhere else. Why? Because actually chemicals are released during sex: dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin. Oxytocin is what brings the bond in, but serotonin is what actually makes us kind of tired after the sex as well, right? And then we have the dopamine, which makes you feel good. Okay, so you have to understand that these chemicals are released through sex. So every time you're having sex with people, you're chemically changing certain things. And so that can then begin to bond you in a way that you didn't anticipate. You see, chemicals will always outbeat you. And you may think you're going to get away with it, but eventually it catches up with you. The chemicals eventually start to speak the loudest in the particular room. Number four, sometimes people have a fear of starting over. And so for them, being in a situationship and going to a relationship is much more easier. In fact, you know what? That's a better flow. Because if I have to go and find someone else, you're kind of cool. You're cool enough. It's probably not a good reason why you should be in a relationship, but you're kind of cool enough. You're kind of chill enough. You don't shout, you don't scream, you don't do too much. Okay, you know what? We'll turn into a relationship. You didn't have a really you're not really either or. You're kind of I am what it is. It is what it is. I'll go with the flow kind of thing. You know what? I wasn't really thinking about relationship, but because you said it, all right, I'll go and see what happens. Let's see what happens. Right? That can also be an issue. Number five is that there's gradual escalation without much clarity, right? So nobody wants to rock the boat. Nobody wants to cause issues. Nobody wants to stop what we're doing. It feels good what we're doing. Let's just see where we go. If we end up in a relationship, we end up in a relationship. You're not really trying to go there because you haven't even started the proceedings. You're just about in a situationship. You're just about in a situationship. Y'all are knocking boots, and then it's like good vibes. Let's just see where it goes, right? Let's just see where we are. And actually, that becomes this very silent agreement, and that silent agreement begins to take you together in a journey where you actually can begin to bond closer to each other, and you get to experience life in a very unique way. And then my last point on this part is that sometimes there can be, external issues, right? Or timing that can knock you from a situation to a relationship. Let's say you're in a situationship and your father falls ill or sick. That person supporting you has given you maybe something that no one else could have given you. They supported you in a particular way that no one else has ever done. And actually, in that space, what they've done is been a rock to you. And so now you're now thinking to yourself, well, maybe I need to look at them differently. Or maybe you had a financial crisis and that person was able to give you advice, or they even gave you finances to meander through that particular time and period. You now are forever grateful and eternally grateful. You start thinking about maybe this could be the person for me. This is how you actually accidentally fall into a relationship. You have to be there to accidentally fall into it. You have to be exposed to it to accidentally fall into it. And a lot of times, this is coming from a place also, I believe, that people have very have attachment wounds that they've not dealt with. So if you don't know anything about attachment styles, this is something done by John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth. And what he was describing was the way that people deal with separation anxiety, which I think is really powerful because we're talking about situationships. The reason why people go in and fall into a situationship and fall into a relationship pretty much have the same kind of ethoses here, which is that it's low stakes. And so the relationship is birthed without having a title. You just kind of fall into it. You know, before you realize it, we are boyfriend and girlfriend. You know, how many people have a story like that? You know, I don't even know how it happened. We were just talking and suddenly we were in a relationship, right? Low stakes. And so a lot of this also, I believe, comes from a place because of attachment styles and attachment wounds. Now, there are 4 attachment styles: secure, which everyone's trying to beat, and then there's anxious, preoccupied, dismissive, and fearful avoidance. Really, really quickly, anxious people are afraid of being abandoned. And so they consistently always want to close the gap with somebody, right? They're always trying to earn people's love. Dismissive, avoidant people tend to fear emotional closeness because they feel like they're being overwhelmed, they feel like they're losing their independence, and they're afraid of rejection. And then you got fearful avoidance. Fearful avoidance are afraid of abandonment, rejection, and they're afraid of betrayal. Okay, and so for them, they always blow hot and cold. They are afraid of being trapped in a relationship forevermore, almost in a sense. Okay, that doesn't mean they can't be in a relationship for long term. I'm just saying, right? Now, why is that important? Because all those 3, the anxious, 2 avoidant aspects, right? Low stakes is really powerful. Why? Because 1, the anxious person wants to prove they're worthy of love. So they can go from a situationship to a relationship, or even from nothing to a situationship, because the situationship will force them to look at their value. Why is he not giving me the relationship? Why is she not giving the relationship? Why is it that we're still just talking and nothing's happening? The anxious person will fill in the gap of the silence to prove that they're worthy. The avoidant person, the dismissive avoidant person, doesn't mind the situationship because it's low stakes. It doesn't require them to commit, and it doesn't require them to go faster than they actually want to. Right. And it doesn't engulf them emotionally because you do what your thing, I'm doing my thing. We're not putting no labels on it. The problem with that is that it will turn into a relationship very soon because actually, as you guys are allowing each other freedom, you actually don't realize you're being turned into the frog with the butter. You're being cooked. Okay. Say it with me. You're being cooked. All right. And the reason B again is because oftentimes you're resisting the relationship, but you won't resist a situationship because again, there's no labels to the situationship. We operate in a gray area, and that's how you get it. You get cooked. Now, the fearful avoidant, okay, or disorganized attachment, dysfunctional, if you want to call it that, they crave intimacy, yet they fear it at the same time. So actually, a situationship is perfect because there are no labels. Once more again, it's very low stakes, and we're not asking you to commit. You can come and go whenever you want to. You're not trapped, which is one of the fears of a fearful avoidant. Do whatever you want to do. Problem with that is they want love. The anxious side of them starts to kick in. Okay, I know we're doing a situationship, but now, I mean, so am I not worthy of being loved? And one of the wounds of a fearful avoidant is that they feel like they're not good enough, and they feel like they're not going to be loved enough, or they feel like they're not worthy of love. So guess what's going to happen? The situationship might prove to be to be the kicker that sends them into a relationship because now they need to prove that they're loved and cared for. They need to know that you want them. They need to know that they're being desired. And also, situationships are brilliant because they can be chaotic, which is what the environment that a fearful avoidant grew up in. And so that hot and cold now works for them. But before they realize it, because that person's been so consistent, they found themselves in a relationship, right? And consistency is actually one of the things that begin to heal a fearful avoidant. The problem is, though, for all the attachment styles, is that yes, it might turn into a relationship, but if people are not doing the work to heal, that relationship's probably going to crumble, and then all of that is going to hurt you again because you're like, I gave my heart over. So, look, I'm going to do a part 2 where I go a little bit more deeper into attachment styles and situationships. But I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, make sure you're liking, you're sharing, you're subscribing, you're clicking on that wonderful bell button. And I really appreciate you guys who are reaching out to us, who are wanting coaching. We've done some great work recently. And those of you who are paying for 5 sessions as well, I really appreciate it. If you recommend a friend, we're taking up another £100 off the figure for you for 5 sessions. So shout out to those of you who have already been doing that as well. We love working with you and love bringing healing to the world as well. So make sure you guys like, share, subscribe, click on that bell button for notification of uploads. Let me know your thoughts down below. Have you ever been in a situation where you just fell into a relationship or fell into a situationship? Have you been in a situationship where you fell into a relationship? Let me know down below. Like, share, subscribe, click on that wonderful bell button for notifications of the uploads. We appreciate y'all.